population is a complete group of people, animals, things, or places that have something in common with each other. If you ask a person to think of an example of a population, the person will probably think of a group of people that all live in the same area. For example, the person might think of the population of people living in San Jose, the population of people living in California, or the population of people living in the United States. However, a population doesn't have to be a group of people that all live in the same area. Any group of people that have something in common are a population, and living in the same area is just one thing that a group of people could have in common with each other. All people living in San Jose are a population, but so are all people who own cell phones and all people who run Facebook. All people living in San Jose are a population because they have something in common with each other. What they have in common is that they all live in the same city. All people who own cell phones are a population because they have something in common. What they have in common is that they all own the same product. All people who run Facebook are a population because they have something in common. What they have in common is that they're all on the same social network. The words complete group are important in the definition of a population. A population is a complete group or a complete collection of people, animals, things, or places without any members being left out. If you're driving and you see a city limit sign, you'll notice that the city limit sign has a number on it that shows the number of people in the population of the city. In order for that number to be showing the exact size of the city's population, that number has to include every person who lives in the city. If even one person is left out, that number isn't actually showing the exact size of the city's population. What this means is that if a city wants its city limit sign to be showing the exact size of the city's population, the city has to change the number on the sign every time a person moves into the city and every time a person moves out of the city. If a city wants its city limit sign to be showing the exact size of the city's population, the number on the sign has to go up by 1 every time a person moves into the city and has to go down by 1 every time a person moves out of the city. Here's another example. All of the employees who work at a certain company are a population of employees. If I'm looking at a photograph that shows all of the employees who work at a certain company, then I'm looking at a photograph of the population of employees who work at that company. However, if even one employee is missing from the picture, then I'm not looking at a photograph of the population of employees who work at that company. If even one employee is missing from the picture, then I'm actually only looking at a photograph of a part of the population of employees who work at that company. What are some other examples of populations of people? All 4,312 people who work for the federal government are a population. All 20,642,819 people attending colleges in the U.S. are a population. All 1,369,532 people in the U.S. military are a population. We need to remember that a population doesn't have to be a population of people. A population could be a population of animals, things, or places. All mountain lions in the Bay Area are a population of animals. All red cars are a population of things. All $5 bills are also a population of things. All universities in the United States are a population of places. And all 50 states in the US are also a population of places. Populations can overlap. For example, college students who are on Facebook are members of both the college student population and the Facebook user population. Also, a population can fit inside of a larger population. For example, the population of people living in California is inside of the population of people living in the United States. Why is the idea of a population important? It's important because the purpose of collecting data is usually to learn something about an entire population. For example, a person who asks 100 college students how many text messages they send each week probably isn't only interested in the amount of text messaging being done by those 100 people. The person is probably asking those 100 college students how many text messages they send each week to get a rough idea of the amount of text messaging being done by college students in general. In general, if you collect data from a larger number of population members, you will get more accurate information about the population than if you collected data from a smaller number of population members. In a perfect world, a researcher would always collect data from every member of the population that he or she is studying. If you collect data from every member of the population you are studying, you will be able to get perfectly accurate information about the population you were studying, as long as all of the data was recorded correctly. As long as all of the data was recorded correctly, you'd be able to make perfectly accurate conclusions about the population you were studying. For example, if I was interested in the amount of text messaging being done by college students in the US, and I asked all 20,642,819 college students in the US how many text messages they send each week, I could use my data set to actually calculate the exact average amount of text messaging being done by college students in the US. I could calculate that average, or mean, by adding the 20,642,819 answers and dividing the total by 20,642,819. The number that I would be calculating in this case would be called a population mean. A population mean is a mean of an entire population. It's a mean, or an average, that describes something about an entire population. The problem is that most populations that people study are so large that it isn't possible to collect data from all members of a population, either because it's too expensive, too time-consuming, or not possible because some population members can't be reached or can't be contacted. What a researcher will almost always do is select a certain number of population members and then collect data from those selected population members only. The group of selected population members that the researcher collects data from is called a sample of the population. Let's think of some examples of samples. If I ask 100 college students to tell me how many text messages they send each week, then those 100 college students are my sample. They are the 100 college students who are providing me with data. If I ask 200 of the 4,312 people who work for the federal government to tell me how much money they make per year, then those 200 federal government employees are my sample of the federal government employee population. They are the 200 people that I'm collecting data from. If I go to a forest and I measure the heights of 300 trees, then those 300 trees are a sample of the population of trees in that forest. They are my sample of 300 trees because they are the 300 trees that I am collecting data from. The number of population members that are included in the sample is called the sample size. In my first example, in which I was asking 100 college students how many text messages they send each week, my sample size was 100. In my example in which I was asking 200 federal government employees how much money they are making per year, my sample size was 200. In my example in which I was recording the heights of 300 trees in a forest, my sample size was 300. In my first example, my sample size was 100 because I was collecting data from 100 college students. In my second example, my sample size was 200 since I was collecting data from 200 federal government employees. In my third example, my sample size was 300 since I was collecting data from 300 trees. In each of my three examples, the sample was the batch of people or the batch of things that I was collecting data from, and the sample size was the number of people or the number of things that I was collecting data from. In my first example, the sample was the 100 college students that I was collecting data from, and the sample size was 100. In the second example, the sample was the 200 federal government employees that I was collecting data from, and the sample size was 200. In the third example, the sample was the 300 trees that I was collecting data from, and the sample size was 300.